Welcome to Theory of Conspiracy. A couple of northern lads from the UK discuss plots, cover-ups, and the unexplainable.
Hi, I'm Andy the Skeptic.
Hello, I'm Carlos. I believe.
If you would like to support the podcast, please talk about this with your friends or give us a review on iTunes. You can comment or contribute at TheoConPod, that's at TheoConPod, or check the link in the podcast description.
I'm going to start recording because that way I can get bloopers.
You can never foresee the future, can you?
Carlos, are you doing star jumps? Because it's way too clicky at your end, man.
Oh, mate, is it?
Sounds like you're unwrapping a Werther's original.
I think it was just my mic must be because I got a hoodie on. Now I've just got a t-shirt. I'm fucking freezing now, you bastards. I'm a tight fuck. I'm not putting heating on. Just put a hoodie on. I'm fine.
Oh,
But yeah,
well,
just
summer's nearly here. Don't break now. You've not had the heating on all winter.
Yeah, Schneider. Phil Schneider. I like the name Phil Schneider.
I got a feeling I could just have dropped off and dial in tomorrow. You two still be chatting.
It's one of those where you start off on the secret bases, and you can literally go from that to another topic, and it just free flows very easily.
naked streaming on Twitch, eh?
Oh yeah.
I don't think you're allowed to do that, Carlos. So stop trying to suggest it all the time. Every week you suggest it.
Don't forget you can leave us a review on iTunes and we will mention it on the show, or send us an audio message to get your voice on air. You can ask us or say anything you like. Check out the links on our social media for our merch store. Each purchase will contribute 50 pence towards supporting the podcast. Also, subscribing to our YouTube and Twitch channels, or sharing this podcast with friends is very much appreciated.
Welcome back, or if it's your first time here, thanks for stopping by. This is Season 2, Episode 5, and we have another guest episode, and we discuss secret underground bases. In the intro, I asked the guests 3 questions, and the score is actually 9 out of 10 and not 6 out of 10 as I mentioned, making our guest the highest scoring guest we've ever had, which almost rivals Carlos, so make of that what you will. Don't forget to check out Facebook for our competition, and it's about time we had another review or listener audio clip we could play on the podcast, so send us your questions via audio on our Facebook or Instagram channels. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show.
Listen up, this is the main bit.
Hi, it's the 5th of March 2021, and we'd like to welcome our special guest for this episode. Some people say he uses bitcoins for toilet paper, and that he's privy to the personal travel plans of Her Royal Highness. All we know is we need to conduct a TheoCon litmus test. So I have 3 yes or no questions so the listener can gauge your tinfoil hat rating on a scale of 0 to 10. So yes or no, was 9/11 an inside job?
Yes.
Ooh.
Did we land on the moon?
No.
Do you believe aliens in spaceships have visited the Earth?
Yes.
Interesting. I like that.
You've scored 6 out of 10. So with that tinfoil hat rating, and bearing in mind that according to the recent stats, this podcast literally gets 3 listeners per week, do you want to tell us who you are and what you do, or would you rather remain anonymous?
I'll just say my name is Jonesy.
Can you tell us something interesting about yourself that no one or only a few people might know about you?
And nothing. I'm a Twitch streamer. Probably the best thing.
You're a Twitch streamer. All right,
Yep.
Cool. Well done. So are we. And that's not how we know each other. Right. So this week's topic is secret underground bases. I might have to shorten the title of that because it's quite long. All right. So, well, Jonesy, right? And this is one I've not really looked into until literally an hour before we started recording, where I got 10 minutes between doing the dishes and between doing the dishes and getting ready to come and record the podcast. So yeah, the Walmart stuff. What's the Walmart stuff all about? I've literally seen a 2-3 minute video on it.
So, there was a major military exercise in America where it was a bit of a weird one, really. All these Walmarts started closing with under the premise that they were doing emergency sewer works. And
Plumbing or something, wasn't it? The
it was
video said.
plumbing, and they
Yeah.
closed 5 of them at short notice. And the rumor was that it was because these Walmarts were the entrances to a massive underground complex for the military. And it all coincided with a particular exercise that was taking place where basically the US military had to try and hide in plain sight. And it was just massive. Jade something it was called.
Right.
And it seemed to coincide with that, and all these rumours. There was supposed eyewitnesses saying that, yeah, they'd seen the entrances in these 5 Walmarts. Somebody superimposed the Walmart's location on a map, and it
I
matched
saw that.
Yeah, it matched perfectly to where this exercise was taking place, and people were just putting 2 and 2 to. For me, did it happen? I don't think it did. For instance, that video that we watched, it all depends on the scale when you say secret underground bases. Every country in the world, from experience as well as from experience, every country has underground facilities for wartime, for planning.
Definitely. I mean, a lot of them are public knowledge as well. You can even go and tour some of them, can't you?
They are.
Especially Europe. Europe's got loads of underground cities. Europe during like you just mentioned, during World War II or after World War II.
In this country alone, we've got plenty of underground facilities, and it just makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, safest place for an attack and to keep things running, military-wise, is an underground base. But that small scale, we're not talking about in this country monstrous complexes where you could fit thousands of people in. They are quite small, and I've been in a couple of them. But the scale that, so for instance, that video with Jesse Ventura, where he's driving down the road and he drives into that underground complex, that is absolute rubbish. The reason being is if a government or a state were going to build something of that scale, they wouldn't have the back doors open so you could just drive in. It would be it would be
accessed via a main road that goes right past it.
I'll tell you exactly what that was after watching the video a couple of times. On the other, so I'll give you an example. So in Salisbury, the government have just approved a tunnel to go past Stonehenge to keep Stonehenge serene and quiet for visitors. What you saw there is the entrance to an underground car park, and on the other side of that ridge is a shopping centre. Because what you saw in that video were the back entrances to the units. There was even a picnic bench and umbrella in one of the scenes.
Yeah.
You're not going to find that in a secret military complex.
No.
What they've done is they built the car park to hide it.
Yeah. To me, that looked very similar, very, very similar to, if anyone knows Warrington.
Yes.
You know it. I don't know if Carlos has been, but Warrington, in the middle
of
Warrington... I know
a couple of landmarks, but not so many places.
Yeah. In the middle of Warrington is Golden Square Shopping Centre. And in the centre is there's a little area where they put stuff on. They put like concerts, little mini concerts on. It's not a massive area. It's called a fish market, an outdoor fish market. But it's a really old fashioned pub, and then there's like a horseshoe shaped shopping centre. And my mum used to work in that pub, and they would park that underneath the shopping centre. And I've been in there in the car a couple of times, and it was very, very similar to what you saw on that Jesse Ventura. It was literally, like they've got Argos in the shopping centre, they've got WH Smith, and literally you would go past and you'd see a number. Some were just numbers, and some were like, no, this is Argos, so that the van driver pulled up at the right door and he unloaded all the Argos stuff so that they could take it upstairs and then sell it. And it looked very similar to that. But yeah, I totally agree with you, because the Jesse thing, a friend put me onto that, and I've been meaning to watch it for ages. And then when this subject came up, I mentioned that, and I probably watched that at the same time you watched it, Jonesy. Just this last couple of weeks. when we decided to record it, and I was like, oh, 95% of that is. I mean, what was interesting was that massive house they were building and the size of it, and they compared it to some of the other buildings. But that's some sort of billionaire that's building some sort of getaway in the mountains. I can understand why it's so big and stuff. So I'm not that surprised. But then his mate starts going in them tunnels, doesn't he? Did you see that bit?
Yeah.
Whereas his mates, but you couldn't call them tunnels. They were more like caves. They were very narrow. It's not like you could hide military in there or anything. They were just natural little formations, weren't they?
It was the key to it all was the fact that all the doors were open, and they weren't even hiding the fact that it was there. There was delivery trucks going in and out, and just some of the random stuff. It was, I mean, I'm not denying. I mean, we know for a fact that the US military have got the most money to spend, and NORAD itself is in a mountain. It's underground, and because it makes sense in time of war, you want all your military establishments to still be standing. So it makes sense to have that. But if a government was going to spend
the same. Sorry, Joe.
Sorry,
is that the same? Is that the same as Cheyenne Mountain, where NORAD is, or is that another one? Is it the same one?
It's in the Cheyenne Mountain Range.
Yeah.
But it's a case of a government
famous by Stargate. Yeah, it's the one they always show at the front of Stargate. Yeah.
If a government's going to spend that much money building an underground facility, they're not going to have it on a show with the back doors open. It's going to be, you know.
I sometimes think when the government show all these documentaries or these podcasts talk about underground worlds under Walmart, for example, it's like they're creating an anomaly. It's like they show you that, so it's like it's the opposite side they're looking at, because these probably underground places do exist, but it's probably not for military. It could be one in case of because especially in America they have lots of these twisters and hurricane seasons where civilians can get underground just in case, or dare I say, if there's some kind of pandemic and you need to go underground for probably somewhere for like a couple of weeks or a month or so. But yeah, I always look at these underground places where, especially when they're under say supermarkets, where there's probably the footfall in these places are probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. You want a place where it's probably you're not going to think it's like you could have it under an airport where it's probably very well guarded. That I'd probably believe under airports because it's very guarded. Where supermarkets, you've got people working night shift, day shift, lorry drivers, cleaners. They're going to come across all this stuff. So I sometimes think it could be some kind of an anomaly.
Yeah, the Walmart places were actually shut though, Carlos, and they never reopened. That's the mystery around it. Now maybe they shut because of profit reasons or something, and maybe the building was condemned. It's coincidence. I don't know how close together all five actually happened.
Because if they're all interlinked with each other, kind of thing. Because if they're all within a radius of say 5 mile radius, then it could be.
They're not.
No,
the spread from Florida, which is on the east side, right all the way over to the west. Like they're not even they're not even in a straight line. They're sort of like dotted. But what they did, what the image I saw, and I'll probably share this on the Facebook or the Twitter, is that they're also saying there's these massive underground now, according to this map, there's a lot of very straight tunnels under America that are 2,000 miles long, because that's the sort of lines that were drawn on this map. So I don't know how real that is. And
how achievable is that engineering wise?
Oh, you could do it. You could do it, no doubt, with modern day technology. You know, we have these machines that can burrow. They burrow through, and behind them they actually put up all the concrete and reinforcement as they go along. So it's possible. It's slow. It's possible. And I think we'll come on to something else in a minute. Maybe there's technologies we don't know about. I know you're going to say that, Carlos. But, so it's possible, but I would question Florida. Actually, if you've ever been to Florida, it's very marshy. Is there enough stable rock under there to actually have a tunnel system? I would question that.
I think
Florida,
America, they do have the money to waste on that sort of project. But the question is, as Carlos was saying then, perfect. He's right with the example of it doesn't necessarily have to be military. So in the Arctic Circle in Norway, you've got that seed vault that's been built solely. So should the proverbial hit the fan, all the seeds of the world, different plants they're going to survive in this special vault that's really well guarded.
Oh, I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah,
because basically, in case of an asteroid hit us and completely killed us, so we could refertilize the planet again, basically.
Yeah,
so a bit like the Greenland film that we've
yes,
mentioned.
A bit like Greenland, yeah.
Okay.
There's something seed vault it's called, and if you Google it, it's a weird looking thing, but that would make sense and that sort of thing. But as I was saying earlier on with America, why would you keep something like that secret? Because we know NORAD exists, and if you're going to spend that much money, because don't forget, before 9/11, it was discovered that the Pentagon was missing something like $1 trillion. Now, that was roughly around the time when these tunnels came to light, the Walmart ones.
Yeah.
So there's $1 trillion been spent somewhere, and nobody knows on what. But the thing is, if you're going to build a complex that's going to keep everybody alive, you wouldn't need to keep it quiet, because surely that makes good sense. And you're going to look good if you tell the world, oh yeah, we produce this network of tunnels, so we're all good. It's a win-win situation. But I'll come to my theory as to where I think something like that exists in a bit, because I've been thinking quite hard about different stories about a particular location, and I think that's where it exists, if you get what I mean.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
like just to finish America off then. So
we would love to do that.
when I watched it, when I watched the 3-minute video, I think I just googled it, and there was I think it only took me like 2-3 minutes to read. It was a short article, and it was a guy, and he was basically saying, yeah, there's these tunnels, Walmart, blah blah blah, and he sort of said right at the top, look, this is just speculation, it's for fun, these aren't facts, it's just a theory. But he did say, look, if this was the military, right, you would either know about it, like the Cheyenne stuff, it's guarded, you're not going to get in, you can see it, you know about it, you know the location, or it would be that top secret that you wouldn't know how to find it, where to find it, and how to get in. It's not going to be a building that's guarded. Apparently, these Walmarts are guarded by a couple of police, but you could overwhelm them and get in and go.
Yeah.
The only bit where it gets my sort of brain going, and obviously I'm sure conspiracy, especially Jesse Ventura, because he's a big conspiracy guy, especially on 9/11. Unless these Walmart have uncovered an entry to something. And it's like, I understand that they're not spaced literally within a certain radius. They could be spaced all over the place. But sometimes they could have discovered how many times have these buildings or houses been built on top of old land, and they discovered they've got like an underground world underneath them. So unless they've uncovered something.
Funny you should say that, but have you heard of the Derinkuyu tunnels in Turkey? Nearly,
Yes.
if you So
it could fit about 20,000 people in there, couldn't they?
Exactly, 20,000 people. It goes down 60 meters. It's got its own internal running water source. They can seal it off from the inside. Loads of different theories. That was only rediscovered quite recently in the 1960s, when a local man stumbled across some tunnels while renovating his house.
Correct. That was designed for, I think they designed it when I think it was the Ottoman Empire were invading, so they could just sort of hide away and they could literally survive, because they had buildings in there where they could keep cattle and livestock, couldn't they? And they literally had airway, like some kind of, it's not air conditioning, but they had some kind of like system where you can let the air. Yeah, ventilation. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So yeah, and how old is that? Is that about a couple of thousand years old? Was it or something?
8th century BC.
Well, yeah, as you look at 3,000 years ago.
I mean, there was churches in there, and I think they knew that the churches came later on and stuff like that. So they sort of said it's been used by. I don't know when it sort of got lost, but yeah, apparently it was only rediscovered in the 1960s.
It's less like civilizations move on, don't they? Really, so they sort of move from, because back then you go where there's water and where the livestock is, don't you? That's what civilization is. That's where they all live. But that's what I'm thinking. Is the Walmarts could be something to do with they may have discovered something, but not into it might not be military bases, but they've uncovered something and they don't know what it is, and they've sort of isolated these certain stores.
I'll come on to my theory about where I think if they were going to build something like a doomsday sort of complex, because military complexes, I don't think they would keep them that secret because there's no need to, because it's just common practice for, I would imagine every civilized country in the world has an underground
Yeah,
military complex or two. But when it comes to a doomsday complex, so the people with the tech to see if, say we've got some sort of killer asteroid on the way that's going to wipe out the Earth,
yeah,
the people with the right tech for that would be the government. Yes, the United States government would have, and they would be able to keep it secret if that was going to happen. And I think the reason they would keep it secret is because of the anarchy that it would cause. If they suddenly announce, oh yeah, in 10 years' time we're going to have a monstrous asteroid hit the Earth, the chaos that would ensue. So they'd have to keep it secret. So what they would do is then they would build, and they've got a crazy amount of money missing. So they would then build a base. Now, if Hollywood's anything to go by, everything hits America. So, or
or
that, or that,
Paris or
yeah,
London.
or Paris or London, yeah.
yeah.
So,
Anywhere with a really good, really famous landmark.
yeah. Um, so I think that they would obviously build something that's less likely to get hit. Now, any complex that you're going to build of that scale, you're going to need not just the complex itself, but you need fresh water to keep everybody alive for God knows how long. And you're talking, you could have thousands and thousands needing fresh water and food and clean air and so on. And the best place on Earth for that is Antarctica, because there's a lot of rumours and stories and theories that there is entrances. People seem to think it's entrances to an underground world, as in that hollow earth theory and stuff. But I don't think it's that anything that crazy. I think that would be the ideal place to build something on that scale because of the facilities. You've got an abundant source of clean water. I mean, we're talking ice sheets of fresh water that are miles thick, clean air. The chance of anything hitting that area compared to the rest of the world is really slim. So that's where you're going to plow your money. And if you look online and Google it, you'll find that for some reason, mysteriously, a lot of very high level people in the world have visited Antarctica under secrecy. It's not been declared why they did it. And even the Pope and some of the top world's religious leaders have been to Antarctica for no reason at all. And I think it's because they're looking at this facility. So that is my theory. I think that's where it is. I think it's Antarctica is the perfect location for something of that scale to be built.
I read something on this many, many, many years ago. There's a famous American general called Richard E. Byrd. I think he travelled there in 1947 to
He
look
did,
for
yeah.
underground bases in Antarctica, and I think it was called Operation High Jump. I think that's what it was called. Investigation looking for underground worlds to sort of, and exactly what you just said is sort of like they were looking for entrances to places, but there was already people there inhabiting it. That's what they said. They could have been the Nazi intelligence going there, because you are 100% correct. Apparently, the ground is so fertile there. You just throw a seed on the floor and it will just flourish. So what you said makes 100% makes
I
sense,
thought it was
because
all covered in snow.
Well, it's there's areas that aren't. There's it's lush. I mean, this US general that took a fleet over to inspect it, they took pictures of areas of the Antarctic with no snow, and that you can look at the pictures online, and some of it is like lush, and they reckon underneath the snow, because it never used to have ice on it. They've done core samples and found that underneath on the rock and that. Did you ever see that story about the map that was created of the Antarctic? And
yes,
this map
about
shows the
500
land.
years, about 500 years ago it was, wasn't it? And how
Yeah,
did they
before
know?
anybody even
Because
been.
we didn't even discover Antarctica until about 150, 200 years ago. So how
Yeah,
did this guy have these maps?
and this map has the rock, not the snow. So it's a map of Antarctica without the ice. And it's like, how did that happen? Um, but yeah, the guy went, didn't he? And they took photographs and aerial footage of areas of the Antarctic that were lush and green. But once that kicked off, the conspiracy came out that, oh yeah, there's an underground world of people living there. And I don't think that was the case. They were looking for Nazis originally because for some reason Hitler had visited it a lot as well. And I think they were going to see why Hitler was visiting the Antarctic because they were worried that he was building some sort of base there himself, or he was going to launch attacks from Antarctica and head north from there, really, because it's the perfect jumping spot. So that's what they were looking for.
Carlos thinks he's in Argentina, so that's the closest.
But
The closest to the Antarctic, isn't it?
and that's why a lot of these, because the rule of thumb is the country which is closer to Antarctica, they take a bigger piece of the pie. So Chile is technically the closest country to Antarctica, so they got a bigger slice of the pie. This could be one of the reasons why England fights so much over the Falkland Islands, because Falkland Islands is quite close to Antarctica, so they get a big chunk of the pie. Because if you look at the how Antarctica is split up into countries, every country is overlapping each other. So in theory, everybody's going to start fighting for land grab. But the key to it is that's going to be once we run out of resources on this planet. If we believe the way climate change, if you believe climate change, then Antarctica is going to be where we get our fresh water, fertile land, and literally where we have to survive as a species. That's why a lot of these people, like Jones has just said, are going to Antarctica because there could have been civilizations which were there hundreds and hundreds, sorry, probably thousands and thousands of years ago, which it was all iced over, and now we're trying to sort of recreate their technology because that's
Wait a minute, Carlos. Right? Is this why you won't put your heating on because you're acclimatizing yourself to go and live in Antarctica? Is that
no,
the
not
reason?
that. No, it's because I'm a tight bastard. That's what it is. But no, it's an interesting subject that what you brought up there, John, because it does lead to, and the conspiracy forums and documentaries and podcasts do talk about lots and lots and lots of underground bases based in Antarctica. They do talk about that.
One way you can test the theory is if you go onto Google Earth and try and zoom in on certain areas of Antarctica, they're purposely blurred out. Now, that can happen at the request of certain governments. So, for instance, when the Afghan War was in its in its heyday, when it was big, all the UK military establishments, so you're talking Camp Bastion, Kandahar, and so on, they were blurred out on Google Earth so that terrorists, basically, Taliban couldn't plan attacks using aerial footage. So, and if you, at the request of any government, you can have that happen. But yeah, there's certain areas of Antarctica that are blurred out. You cannot see what's there.
Gosh, Nick's always sending me pictures of Antarctica to show it's proof of a crashed spaceship.
Yeah, there was a picture that came out and it showed it
like a trail and something at the end of it.
Yeah, they've kind of sussed what that is. So they released the original photo of what that was, and these massive research stations that you get in Antarctica and the Arctic. They're on sleds. They're on skids, so you can move them. In fact, they had to recently move the British one. So we've got a massive one there, a research station that we provide meteorologists to and stuff. And I don't know if you saw in the news recently, a massive part of the ice shelf broke off, and when they knew it was happening, they moved the entire research station away from it, and obviously it creates a trail, and it happens all the time. They have to because of meltwater and so on, and that's what that was. It was actually they zoomed in on it. They released the footage, and it was a shed load of, it was basically a convoy of trucks on skids moving that caused the trail. So that's the thing. A lot of these things can be proven genuine. But I still think that there's stuff happening in the Antarctic that is definitely, people don't want us to know what's going on there because they're so protective of what's going on. And as Carlos says, the Falklands, perfect stopping point, because to fly to the Antarctic, you've got to go via the Falklands. All our meteorologists fly south. They stop at Ascension Islands first, which has got a massive Met Office and a meteorologist section, and then from there they go to the Falklands. There's no other way of getting there. It's just way too far.
Yeah,
which is why
that's what I'm saying with Chile. It's too far.
Yeah. So, but I think that's where it's all happening. I think, and it's also very protected. You cannot go to the Antarctic without a permit. You can't get there whatsoever. You're just not allowed.
That's the bit
Yeah,
where
yeah, I knew
conspiracy
that.
theorists go crazy because they start saying, why can't just random person go there with a plane or a boat or a ship, I should say? But you can't. They don't let many people on, do they? I'm sure
No,
the
it's
governments will
pretty.
say due to pollution, not population, pollution, I should say. But it does add fuel to the fire. Where the only thing I would sort of suggest is because you mentioned the maps from about 500 years ago. So how did this person who created these maps know about Antarctica? And if there were civilizations living there, people are going to ask what happened to them, and did they flourish as a civilization? And if they were, for example, eradicated, and these were advanced civilizations, then we're going to start thinking, shit, what's going to happen to us? That's the bit where I always sort of throw about why we're sort of scared of our past, and if we did, I always wish people we can always learn from our mistakes, but we're always trying to sort of oppress people, like not tell them the knowledge, and it goes back to
I
Antarctica.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is down to. I know it always seems to boil down to this is religion. So, for instance, the old story of if aliens did visit Earth, intelligent life, the government wouldn't tell anybody because of the anarchy it would cause, the sheer panic. Because instantly, and I think a lot of it is Hollywood is to blame. Because at the moment, any aliens that visit Earth are instantly they want to blow us up. Independence Day, for instance.
Independence Day, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
you
yeah,
would
yeah.
have you would have absolute chaos if the American government suddenly announced, "Oh yeah, they've visited us in ships, they've said hello and stuff." You would get absolute anarchy because you would have all these people that think they're here to kill us, and the world would just fall to pieces. You would have the religious, the fanatics that think that's impossible. God
We're the
only
chosen
created man, and
race, yeah, yeah.
exactly. So it would just the sheer chaos that it would cause. It's just easier to keep it quiet. Um, which is why I think they would keep anything like that quiet as well, because of the group of people that would just go off the rails. I mean, look at what happened with Trump supporters recently taking over the Capitol building. That was a small group. Imagine that
Yeah,
on a
across the world.
scale
Yeah.
across the world. If it was announced that we'd been visited by intelligent life, it would be unthinkable. And as I said, a lot of it is down to Hollywood creating this image that we'll get annihilated with the first contact we make.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and that's the thing where you mentioned religion, and it's sort of the two biggest religions is Catholicism or Christianity and Islam, and they're probably, if you add them two religions together, you're looking at about 3.5, 4 billion people on the planet, which is
Yeah,
that's half the planet shitting themselves because they'll think, no, we're the chosen race, we're the chosen people, and now you realize, shit, no, we're not. We're just practically bacteria or
yeah,
cockroaches. Then that's
and
the
then
bit where it'll go into meltdown.
yeah, and instantly one person just needs to. Oh, they're here to take us. They're here to drain us of our resources. I don't know if you ever remember the show V years
Yes.
back.
yeah, yeah.
It just straight away. I mean, that's how long ago we had this crazy idea that we were going to have our resources stripped by some alien race whose planet was suffering. And even back then, you've had people like David Icke who thinks the royal family are lizards. That's V. I mean, it's in the early 80s. That's where that rubbish came from. It was Hollywood once again to blame for. So if as I was going back to my original point, if we had this monstrous asteroid heading towards us, and they knew that Planet X or this asteroid was going to hit us in about 10 years' time, they wouldn't tell people because that's 10 years of sheer anarchy and people going off the rails, thinking, well, I'll do what I want because I'm not going to be here for much longer. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
You always have
we
to
would
choose who survives and who dies. So you have to. I'm sure
yeah
you have to pick. Okay, certain people under the age of 40, scientists, geologists, engineers,
yeah.
plumbers, for example,
Well,
because that's what they need to start selecting the civilized the people. Say 1 million people, which are going to repopulate the say America. Say 1 million people from England, 1 million people from France, because you can't
okay.
save
You need a
everyone.
million people.
Do you know?
You need. I think you need 60,000. I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, that's why there
because
was
of G population.
60, that, yeah. It's
that, yeah.
I think less than 60. I might be wrong, but less than 60,000,
That's
you'll
why I
end up
was
with
saying about the
gene
religious
issues.
leaders. You had the religious leaders visit the Antarctic. Well, they would have to be involved because of all the people you save, regardless of how many it is, that it's going to be a cross section of religion as well. So they're going to have a say as well. So it's even Putin and the Russian Orthodox head of state visited Antarctica, as well as
Yeah.
the Pope. And so it's all of it. Now, why would they? Why on
Maybe
earth?
that's where they keep the aliens. Maybe that's the real Area 51.
Yeah.
Well, it is one for you. Just talking about the Pope. The Pope has gone on record, probably I say a couple of years ago, and he is welcomed aliens. It wasn't talking about green men, but if there is life out there, then you would be welcomed into Christianity.
It's a religious pissing contest, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like everybody wants to be on the side of the new boys. So it's like if these aliens pitched up in America and actually, yeah, they've come and chatted to us, the rest of the world would be like, well, that's not very fair. And it'd be like, well, now America have got aliens on their side. We're all doomed. And then next thing you know, you got a war. It's a lose-lose situation for everybody. So the aliens are probably sat there thinking, well, I can't land there because they'll kick off with them. And it's it's like, and then they'll just fly off saying, you know what, stuff it. We don't bother with the Earth. It's crap. It's
Or
it's
they
a
go to
real
Antarctica, where everyone's got a slice of the pie.
But they can make
See,
endless
we're back
snowmen.
to aliens in Antarctica again.
It'd be the perfect place for him. But I don't believe in any of this rubbish about the Earth being hollow and there being civilizations underneath it.
No.
It's just that would be impossible to hide because, and apart from one incident that happened, which was quite interesting. So how they measure earthquakes and the
Yeah, through
strength of
the
earthquakes and where
Richter
they
scale and
originate.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, they have sensors all around the Earth at different listening locations, and when an earthquake kicks in, it resonates through the Earth, and that's how they know the core of the Earth is molten with a solid iron ball in the middle, and so on, because of the way the waves of the earthquake pass through it as it goes through
Well,
the
it
solid.
bounces off the iron, doesn't it? So
It does, yeah.
on the
Now,
angle, they know exactly where the aftershock's going to come back up,
now,
don't they?
yeah, something you can Google and read yourself because it definitely happened. Is there was an earthquake and it was a powerful one. I can't remember where it originated from, but apparently it made the entire Earth ring like a bell, as if the Earth was hollow. And they cannot
Right.
explain why. It just gave this frequency that resembled a bell. And
What part of the world was it?
So I think the earthquake was in Alaska, because apparently they have some of the biggest earthquakes there and nobody knows because it's so remote. Anything can happen there and nobody knows it. But apparently, when it resonated through the earth and they measured it on the Richter scale, it also left this frequency like it dinged. It
Like
made
it was
the earth
hollow.
ding like a bell. Yeah. Now that I still don't think we've got a hollow earth. I don't believe in any of that at all.
Unless we've got big
It could
holes in certain parts of the world, because the world's
Well,
a big place.
it's in South America somewhere. I think it's Chile or Paraguay. There's a cave system, isn't there, that's ridiculously deep, and they have to go down in suits to keep the heat out. And it's got some of the biggest crystal formations in the world. Once again, you can look it up. And these things are like the size of houses. These pure crystals that are massive. It's got pictures of people stood on them, and it's so hot they've got to wear special suits. And that isn't that deep. So what's further down? We just don't know, do we? Because we can't get down there.
Yeah, you don't have to go that deep. I mean, even mines were quite warm.
Yeah.
How far? What's the deepest mine? Like 3 miles or something? I don't know.
Don't
I'm
know. I
thinking
mean,
UK here, but
Well, it makes sense
we've
because Chile's got some of the biggest mines. Because my father's from Chile. He was a copper miner, and they used to go miles and miles down into the ground. So it makes
I'm
sense.
just thinking coal mining. In the UK, man.
they
It
did
was
get deep.
hot. Yeah, it was hot, and you don't have to go. I mean, that's one of the alternative energies, isn't it? Why don't we drill down, push water down, it gets hot, comes back up as steam. You run the steam to generate a turbine. You've got energy out there
Well,
using the core, Earth's
that's
core.
that's what they do in Iceland, and not the place your mum goes to, because all mums go to Iceland. It's in the country Iceland. All your heating is geothermal. venting.
Mm.
They just literally, all the water is heated up by the thermal vents because it's volcanic, and everybody's house is heated via that. So it's free heating for everyone. So yeah, it does exist. That tech is already there.
There's a couple of things I want to mention. Do you think we would get enough warning to get people get the 60,000, 10,000, 1,000, whatever the number is?
Yeah, I
Would
think
we get enough warning? I don't. What, even from like a sort of killer solar flare?
Would you mean
yes.
like a warning for like a couple of days or like a couple of years? You think? Would you? What were you thinking?
You'd need days to get people there, wouldn't you, Carlos? We've
You need
talked
what?
about how
Sorry.
hard it is to get there. You'd need a couple of days to get people there. Talked about how hard it is.
Yeah, I think you would get more than enough, because at the moment they can predict solar activity years in advance now. It goes in a cycle, and some years are stronger than others, but they can predict when it's going to be a strong year, and they can do it in advance because you get warnings about GPS and things being potentially affected. The other big thing is there's a couple. Obviously, if it was something coming towards us from space, if it was big enough as though like a world ender, they would see it. You could see it coming.
Well,
Compared
we
to a
didn't
small,
spot that. We didn't spot Oumuamua until it had gone past us.
yeah, but that's not a world ender. That's just it. We're talking something that would be big enough to wipe out a continent, but like a
Like a
dinosaur
size of
ending.
Mount, like a size of Mount
Yeah,
Everest or something.
like another dinosaur.
That's true. I mean, what was it? What is it? 20 like a football pitch long or something?
Yeah, exactly. That's not a world ender. And if that
I-
hit, yeah,
yeah.
I can think of a few places like that to it.
I
But
don't. I
It'll
don't
probably
think it
wipe
has
out.
to be that.
It'll,
I don't think it has to be that much bigger. You know.
well, the one that hit and took the dinosaurs out was pretty big. Not like moon sized, but it was big. But it's inevitable it's going to happen at some point. We're not that lucky that we're never going to get hit by something large. It's happened a few times. They reckon the moon
Yeah.
was created by something hitting the Earth. So
Yeah, it was almost another planet, wasn't it? The moon's
yeah,
almost. If
exactly.
you
Yeah.
think about it, the moon is.
we should not be. That shouldn't be our moon, but they say they call it the second Big Bang, where two planets sort of punched each other, and the sort of remnants of what was left over became the sort of the moon what is today. That's a theory. They don't, to honest, they don't know how it. They just assume it's that.
I've got another question for you then. So mentioned earlier on about. I was waiting for Carlos to mention no technologies we don't know about, because that's your answer for everything, Carlos. But there's a guy you mentioned when we brought this subject up called Philip Schneider.
Yeah, Schneider, Phil Schneider. I like the name Phil Schneider.
I don't know if Jonesy went and had to look at his name.
No, because
and looked him up.
it's not so much. It's just Phil Schneider's. He became famous probably in the 90s. Was it 80s and 90s? Can't remember.
80s, 90s, yeah.
80s, and
More
his
80s, I
father.
think, yeah.
His father was a military person, and he started talking about when he discovered some because he was working for the military and he was sort of some kind of engineer, and he went to the Juicy Mountains, spelled Dulce, Juicy Mountains in New Mexico, and they discovered there was some alien bases. So yeah, literally alien bases where you could travel literally, I can't remember, probably miles or kilometers down into the mountains, and there was a bit of a standoff between the US military and the aliens, where he was talking about where the 4 or 5 military people he was with were killed by some kind of technology they had, and even showed where his stomach was opened up by some kind of beam, and he lost some 2 or 3 of his fingers where it looks like it's been melted off. His hands have been melted off, and he started talking about all these military bases, but these were the dark evil aliens where they were kidnapping humans and doing experiments with them, and that's where there was some kind of confrontation. And once he started going on some kind of would be before social media, YouTube, so he'd probably be going on some kind of terrestrial TV, and he started getting a bit of momentum, and a lot of people started reading and talking about him. And then lo and behold, about a year, so not even a year, probably a few months after he was going public, he was found dead in his apartment.
Yeah, that was interesting. They also say that a load of people he worked with also ended up the same way, but I never saw any evidence or any other names. Also, when I was looking at this, I do remember this story, man. I do remember this story from like the 90s.
Yeah.
And I just sort of dismissed it. I remember a friend telling me about it. Oh yeah, this guy, and there was a stand. He reckons he was he was the first one to see him. He says he went down. He describes how he was in this spacesuit type outfit, and he said, but there was this awful smell, and it was like the worst garbage can you could ever smell. And there were these 3 or 4 aliens, and he said he had this Walter PPK, and he gets his gun out. I mean, what's an engineer doing with a gun when you've got a marine stood behind you with a machine gun? He gets his gun out and he reckons he killed 2 of them, and then the third one did this laser beam thing on him.
And
And
it opened him up like a sardine, didn't it? As you say.
Yeah, and the marine pushed him back into this lift or whatever, and he was hauled back up. But 60 people, he reckoned, died. But he also went on. This is why I mentioned, to describe this laser beam type tunnel making machine, which I have seen someone actually put a YouTube video together, and they compare it to. Have you ever seen the film The Core, where they
Yes.
go down to the core
Yeah.
of the Earth to restart the spin of the
And they have to
core of
set
the
some
Earth?
nuclear devices off to get the
Yeah,
core going
yeah,
again. Yeah.
yeah, and that's exactly how that works. That Hollywood thing works. But this guy, this Philip, definitely came out with it before Hollywood came out with it, so it wasn't the other way around. But yeah, that was interesting.
The one thing that I find, obviously coincidences do happen, but once he's going public and he's in the public domain and he's doing lectures or speeches, whatever you want to call it, and then so he's got the attention of the world, because this is obviously through newspapers and news outlets. Then he just commits suicide in his apartment. Obviously, we don't know what mental state he was in, or if he had if he was mentally not stable or he owed the mafia money. We don't know. But I just find it strange where he's done the hard bit and then he just takes his own life, allegedly. So,
Yeah, well, you don't know if he had depression or anything, do you? And
that can be said about a lot of people that have tried to, uncover stuff. It's a case of, so the problem I've got is that a lot of Americans, they're just desperate for fame, and it's been like that for decades.
yeah.
They'll come up with anything to get famous, and when they don't become famous or famous for the wrong reasons, that's when they top themselves. So you have to take everything that people come out with a pinch of salt, because the mountain range that he was on about, anyone could go there and have a look. It's not like it's completely cut off from civilization and no one can check his theory out. A lot of this stuff just never holds water because, like the Jesse Ventura video, it ends very conveniently at a certain point and never carries on. It's just purely it's sensationalism, and I think if that sort of thing did exist, I don't think for 1 minute aliens would pitch up and let themselves be discovered that easily. They've travelled light years. It's like the old thing about, oh yeah, aliens. There's a UFO there. It's got flashing lights on it. I don't think for 1 minute that aliens are going to travel thousands of light years with the most amazing tech to have traffic light system attached to their ship to advertise the fact they've just pitched up. It's like, for me, it's like, no, if they're clever enough to get here, they're going to be clever enough to hide completely or not get discovered in the middle of a mountain by some bloke with a space battle. It just sounds way too
that's what I dismissed that in the 90s when I read it.
It's probably not so much that sometimes you leave like a serial. You might have the world's greatest serial killer, and he might leave a breadcrumb. He might leave a fingerprint, or he might leave something which you'd be able to catch him. So sometimes I just feel that these advanced civilizations could sort of get complacent and leave the back door open, or forget to close off an old. Say if they had an old military base in a mountain and they forgot to close it off or just completely seal it off. It goes back to, I think you mentioned early on in the podcast, you talked about obviously Independence Day, they make aliens. And I do believe there's, like on this planet Earth, the yin and yang, we have the good and we have the bad. Phil Schneider talks about these aliens being malevolent. They were not good. They were here sort of like experiment. They were just they're sort of like the perfect story, kidnapping people and just doing experiments on them. Literally, he says he was just doing experiments, and he said I think he talks about he was seeing like lots of body parts dismembered and melded together, and like experiments have been done on them, on these humans. So I'm assuming if we do believe there's a civilizations that live in the universe, we could have the good side and also the bad side, and that's what the Phil Schneider talks about. He talks about the aliens you wish don't exist, because obviously if they are horrible and violent and malevolent, then we've got no chance. But I'm not saying it's true or false. I just found it interesting because his father was a military person as well, and
He has a
he had a
picture of his
background.
dad. He has a picture of his dad talking to another guy, and he holds it up. And on the video, he holds the picture up, and you can't see it because the video quality is that bad. But you can go and find it on websites. And I thought he was holding the picture up, and it was some grey alien. He's going, "This is the alien, and this is what he's called." What ruins it for me? He reckons the alien was from Venus.
Oh.
Now, Venus is not. Yeah, there's
It was
not.
Venus was like the cliched sort of. So originally in the very early 50s and 60s, it was Mars and the Martians. Then it changed to Venus, and then at that in the 80s, all aliens came from Venus, because Mars we could see through a telescope and prove that they didn't, and Venus became the mystery until the Russians actually landed a probe on Venus and took pictures of the surface, and nothing's living on that shithole. I'm telling you, it's awful.
One that satellite what went to Venus from the Russians, was it just shot out the sky? He said there was some. I was
No,
sure I read something. It was completely shot. There was something with it. There was
no,
a satellite that was shot out the sky, like it was just.
nah. It landed. So it's the only one that's ever been to Venus. It landed on Venus and took photos. It took photos of it as it landed, and then on the surface. But because the atmosphere is so harsh, it literally melted after about
It's the
40 minutes.
hottest. It's the hottest planet
Yeah,
in the solar system. It's hotter than Mercury, even though
because
Mercury's closer to the sun.
because of its composition, its atmosphere
Yeah,
and its composition, it just melted. But they got some
yeah.
amazing pictures, and a lot of people forget that we've actually got pictures of the surface of Venus. Um, they reckon that our best chance for life, once again, this goes back to Antarctica, is Europa,
Yeah, the
because
moons
it's an
of
ice.
Jupiter.
Yeah, it's an ice planet. You're talking miles and miles of ice, and they reckon the water underneath is warm because of the core. That's just like Antarctica. So it kind of mirrors it. If you're going to harbour life, it's going to be under there. And that's their next. They're planning on trying to get there. I mean, to be honest with you, we've only just really started going to Mars properly, haven't we? It's going to take a long time for us to even reach somewhere like that. We're a bit backward when it comes to space exploration.
Going back to Antarctica, I've just remembered one of the other things I wanted to mention, but again, it's a video I'll share. It's on YouTube. The most hidden underground cities. It's only a few minutes long. It's quite good. But there's these guys underground in London, and they just used an old base. I think they were. I can't remember if they were tube tunnels or something. It was something. It's something like that. They look very tube tunnely. That were disused, and literally they basically got a farm underground. They're just using obviously they're using special lights to replicate the sun. I can't remember what the type of light's called, but yeah, they're using just using lights, and they've got hydroponics and everything set up to efficiently use 70% of the water. So there's very little waste than you normally would. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, all the tech is there to live underground. Even down to, so if you look at Elon Musk's batteries, I mean,
Yeah,
he's rescued so many countries with his batteries, and didn't he produce that massive battery in Australia not long ago? So the tech's there. You could quite happily live underground, as you say, with the farming, the fresh water's there, power. Musk's, the Antarctic gets that much light over a certain period. So it's like it's light for 6 months of the year and dark for 6 months. And you can gather that light over the 6 month period, store them in Musk's batteries, and power it for the dark period. It's all the tech is definitely sat there.
Well, Elon Musk said the same thing, where we could, if we had solar panels, say a radius of 100 meters, so 100 miles by 100 miles, we could power the planet, the entire planet. So 100 miles by 100 miles, that's fuck all. But it just shows what
Well,
you just said,
you've
Jones,
got plenty of
that
room. You've got plenty of room in the desert to do that.
Yeah.
exactly Sahara. But why don't we do that? So the technology's there.
I don't know. I think it's all down to money. It really is money, and you start giving away patents. If, for instance, they reckon that we've had water-powered fuel cells for cars for decades, but the oil companies bought them because they want money for their oil. You know, we've still got oil to sell. If we release all these water-powered cars, we're done for. We're done for. So all this amazing tech to give it away. That's why iPhones are so expensive. You know,
Oh yeah,
it's crazy. Tech, it's all big money. And if you give something away for free, you ain't getting the cash. It's just the way of the
like
world,
Tesla,
unfortunately.
like the original
Yeah,
Tesla, Nikola Tesla. He gave it away for free, and he died penniless in his hotel
yeah,
room.
exactly. And the world is greedy. At the end of the day, it's all about cash. So you're not going to get anything for free. But I think if going back to the Antarctic thing, if there was some sort of a super place, a refuge built, it would be a multinational thing. The problem you've got is that on the flip side of it is if you were to construct something so big on such a grand scale, how could you keep that operation secret? Because you're going to see a flotilla of ships moving back and forward from the Antarctic, because the materials and the infrastructure it would take to build something of that scale, that the equipment needed is astronomical, which is why I suppose if it was Antarctica, it's easier to hide that sort of activity in Antarctica than it would be in the States. So, because this day and age, with social media and people, it's their hobbies to find this shit out. You can't hide it. You couldn't hide it in civilization because it would get out instantly. You couldn't build a super base in the middle under a Walmart because people are nosy. You know,
Yeah.
it just does happen. So I think Antarctica is the place. It's the most uninhabited, barren place on Earth. There is nowhere like it. Even on Google Earth, there's no satellite gone over it properly to record what's there. So if you're going to do it, it's there. It's the only place on Earth you could build anything of that scale, I think.